These companies were having real problems. They're spread across multiple locations. They're not hitting sales targets. They have high turnover. They're looking for solutions to those problems.
Practice makes progress when it comes to employee training and development. And it's really not about just checking a box. It's about shaping teams that drive performance that customers can feel. I'm really excited today to have special guests with me, Kim Ramirez, the co-founder and CEO of Fact Sumo.
We've all been in classes where the teacher is teaching, right? And no one's learning. Your training is really built around micro topics. The employee feels like they're mastering one thing before they have to master everything.
You'll want to stay to the end when Kim is going to share her 4 secrets for building learning that sticks. Let's get into it. Kim, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Fact Sumo.
So, you gave a wonderful opening. Yeah, Fact Sumo is a training platform that allows companies to build high-performing teams and build or rebuild their reputation from the inside out. And I handle the business side of things. I am partnered with my brother, Kevin, who was the creator of Fact Sumo. He handles more of the technology and the technical side of Fact Sumo. So we have the product and the business together.
I was really blown away the first time I looked at your platform. And so maybe I'll just hover on this for a minute.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I tell people a little bit about this experience, because to me, it was an app. It was clean. It was fun. It was like almost like directed. Just tell us a little bit about what it was like when someone's using the platform.
Yeah, so when someone's using the platform, we keep it simple. We keep the distractions away. We keep you focused. And your training is really built around micro topics. So if you're thinking of a big topic, right? Let's say you are in the banking industry and you want to have your employees learn about your checking account products, right? We wouldn't just have one training on checking. We would have micro topics built in where you have your consumer checking, you have your business checking, and then whatever else they have. And so the employee feels like they're mastering one thing before they have to master everything. And then they're building their learning as they build their confidence. So they'll start on, say, something very factual, and then it will move to scenario-based training. But they only move if they built the foundation. And so that's how we keep the engagement high, and we know how confident you are in the material.
That's excellent. When I think about, kind of the traditional criticism of the way training and development is done in the past, when, employee starts, maybe it's onboarding, or maybe it's like once a year they go and they sit in a room for hours or days on end, and they just get information kind of thrown at them, poured into them, and then they retain some of it, and they're frustrated, and at times they're not performing well. I mean, it feels like this is really the antidote to that. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair statement. And so, look, we've all been in those sessions where, it's like everything's coming at you really quick. It's information overload. And those trainings in person are important, and we really value them. But as you walk out of that training, especially if you're customer facing, you need time to practice, right? You need to process that information at a pace in which you can consume it. So we always advise our customers that they need to get the message out that we're different than compliance training. They're meant to be using Fact Sumo daily, practicing little and often, 5-10 minutes here and there during their downtime, so that they are more mirroring how they've learned to play a sport or they've learned a musical instrument. Consuming it all at once is not going to help you feel comfortable with the material.
Yeah. When I think about platforms like Duolingo have really exposed the value of this kind of micro training and, almost a gamified, like regular reminders of doing it in little chunks on a continuous basis rather than long term. I just think about my kids are always like making sure they're keeping their streak. And I
Yeah.
got a very similar feel the first time I looked at Fact Sumo.
Yeah, and so I'm glad. I mean, that's what we aim for. And so, but what we want to do is really give people information, right? Because we've all been, studying something new, and you think you're doing a great job, right? And then, you get to the test, and then you
Right.
realize maybe you didn't understand the information as well as you thought, or you're standing in front of a customer and you realize you don't understand the information as well as you thought. And so we have these feedback loops built in, where we share with the individual learning their confidence score. So if you're only 20% confident in, say, checking accounts, right? Then you're probably in consumer checking accounts, to stick with the micro theme. You're probably not ready to talk to customers yet, right,
Right.
about it. So you have to do a bit more work, and then your manager also knows that you're only 20% confident. So they need to make sure you have the time to build that confidence so that when you're in front of a customer, you're giving a great experience.
I love that. I love that. Such a unique value proposition. I think we'll probably want to even dig in a little bit further as we go, but I'd really like to, kind of take a step back and just hear the origin story. Like, what was launch like for Fact Sumo when you first got started? What were some of the things you did to really find your niche in the market?
Sure. Yeah. So my brother is the creator, my brother Kevin, as I mentioned, and it was really born out of a personal frustration he had. He was headed to Costa Rica for a month, and he really just wanted to build his conversational skills in Spanish so he could really practice. And everything he looked at on the market required him to start over, to do everything, the grammar, the reading, the writing. And he really just felt like he needed the everyday words that he was going to use, and he needed to practice them because he had studied Spanish, right? So he still remembered the grammar for the most part, but he just didn't have the words.
Mhm.
So he built it for himself, and that's who, the first user was. And then he had some friends start asking, well, can you put Italian in there? Can you do that for German? And so, he started doing that. And then he saw that there was a market for education. And that's when he asked me to join. And that's when I jumped in.
That's great. Well, and let's talk about, I'm sure if you're jumping into a field like education, I can think of like hundreds of layers or different, different permutations. Talk a little bit about the market dynamic when you first stepped into this space.
So, we really thought the K-12 market and nonprofits that focus on, that have an education component, like literacy, for example, would be our customers. And what we learned, over time, but relatively quickly, was that they have a need, but not a willingness,
Hmm.
right? And that was a bit disappointing because when we were piloting, they were seeing great results, right? And we were in an urban school district with um, ninth grade students, English language learners. They were smart kids, but their parents moved them to the United States when they were in ninth grade, so about 14 years old. And so they were smart, they just didn't know English, and they were looking to get up that curve quickly. So in about 6 weeks, they learned 1,000 words, and the school was really just trying to get them to learn 250 through the school year.
Wow.
And so, we were excited, and we thought that was going to lead to, a contract and a rollout. But there wasn't really that desire to improve. And that was disappointing. And we're based here in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is a school district that has some real issues. The state had taken it over. 30% of students can read, write, and do math at grade level. That means 70% can't. That's about 140,000 students. So from our perspective, we thought, oh, we have a great need here, right? There's a great need here. But there really wasn't a willingness to bring in new ideas. So not just our product. If somebody didn't want our product, that's one thing, but they're not, testing ideas out. They're not bringing in any other products. Whereas, New York had a whole program called the Innovation Zone, where it was bringing in new ideas, testing them in its classrooms, and then deciding whether or not to roll them out. But they really got to shape the product. And Philadelphia doesn't have a program like that. And quite frankly, most large cities don't. And that was, surprising and, disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some of the ways, it sounds like you had some early wins, but also just some early setbacks. What were some of the ways that you kind of iterated the solution and maybe iterated just your tests in the market?
So we tested the market a couple of different ways. And so the first was to test the age, right? Because we're a platform that can be used by learners of all ages. So we worked with universities, we worked with high schools, and then we worked with a prep school with elementary students. So I would say we learned there that we can go as low as third grade. That was, and then to adult learners. Where we found we had the best fit is where there's an issue, a problem that impacts the school like all day long. It impacts all teachers. So entering into the English language learning program in big urban school districts where there's, a high percentage of foreign students, that was, a great fit. But where we found, a wonderful fit was with the New Jersey School for the Deaf, the Katzenbach. What most people don't realize is that 90% of deaf children are born to hearing able parents. So when the child is identified as deaf, everyone around them needs to learn sign language. So there's the immediate family, parents, siblings, there's extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, and friends and family. And the superintendent there was really quite visionary, this woman, Joan, and really wonderful. She wanted to not only help the students get up to speed, because most of them start there with just gestures. Like this is to eat, this is drink, but they don't know American Sign Language.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they really work to educate the whole family and remove the barriers that come with that. So understanding that, not all parents have jobs that free them up on Tuesdays at 6 to come take an ASL class. So they wanted their teachers, which we videoed their teachers, teaching friends and family ASL. And they wanted to allow them to do that at home because they did have somebody to practice with. They do have their kid, right? And then they do have the school to practice with. So they really just wanted more options for them to learn. And that was, that was when I was really in because I saw the full potential.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So today you're not really focused in the K-12 market anymore. Can you talk about, kind of where you are now and maybe some of the steps that brought you there?
Yeah. And so we really focus on corporate training and we're, we're always willing to work with a K-12 environment if they're interested. And if there's a superintendent that watches this and wants to give us a call, we'd love to have a conversation. But what we found was the needs are are quite similar in a corporate training. There's just more of that willingness to solve them. So the conversation really moved to, well, we'll think about it, we'll see, to when can we get started, right?
Mm.
Because these companies were having real problems. They're spread across multiple locations. They're not hitting sales targets. They have high turnover. So, they're looking for solutions to those problems.
Yeah. So what was the pivot like when you started there? Maybe how did you discover that maybe this is another kind of adjacent market? And then what was that? What kind of facilitated or prompted that pivot?
So I would say we always knew it was a market, because I'm a CPA. My pre-corporate life, I'm a CPA. I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers. I am required as a CPA to do 40 hours of continuing education a year. And so at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and pretty much any professional service firm where the people are the revenue generator, training is core to what they do. So I knew companies have learning and development teams, but it wasn't the place for us to start because there was a lot of learning we had to do. And so we really had to build out our analytical tools, and it was easier to do that in a classroom setting because people learn over time, right? It's not an immediate gratification kind of tool. You learn over time. So we needed to be in a classroom setting for the semester, for the school year, and really build out the analytical tools that help teachers manage engagement, help them really push that learning forward, by seeing what information they needed over time and how that changed. And so I would say the move into corporate was more of an evolution,
Hmm.
but it was just more of an evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. And talk about what you do for corporations now that it sounds like that's sort of your focus or sweet spot. What does that engagement look like? And then how do you implement?
Yeah. So, what we really do is we give them information at the individual level so that they can build a culture of continuous learning.
Hmm.
So each week they're getting information about an employee's effort, engagement, confidence. And then the managers are getting weekly coaching on how to look at this information and help them understand, kind of which team members to congratulate, which team members to nudge a little, and which team members to really focus on. And that information really has now allowed them to shape their team. So with one of our customers, they and their customer facing team, they thought their churn, that bottom 10%, their churn, that bottom was 10, and that's what they would be churning. And what they realized once they had the data was their bottom 10% was actually 40%.
Oof.
And so there were 40% of their employees across 40 locations not engaging with the training,
Hmm.
not learning about the products. And you can't sell something you don't understand. So now the financial performance made sense. It was, they had the data to tie it to that, but also the reviews. You could see, like, which locations had good reviews and which locations had not so good reviews, on Google Review or Glassdoor, wherever their reputation was either being praised or taking a hit.
Yeah. So once you found that spot, I'd be interested to kind of hear transitioning from launching and kind of getting up and running and finding that, product market fit. What did it look like when you moved to the grow stage? When we started to think about, just consistency and sustained systems and those kinds of things. What did that transition look like? And what are some of the things you did to expand that way?
Yeah. So there were a few things we had to do. So, it's one of those things where there's how you think it will work, and then there's actually how it works. So, I mentioned earlier that we have a broad audience. We go from, third grade all the way to, which is about, like 8 years old or so, all the way to adults. So you need a design that works for all those different ages. So, we had a little bit more gamification in there. And what we learned was that when you're learning something new, you don't want to worry about like gems or hearts. You really just want to know how confident you are in the data, or in the training, in the material. So we stripped it out. We simplified it, and we just give you your confidence score. So that was a big learning for us.
Yeah.
And how we present the tool. And then from there, it was, so once we got the user experience down, it was really about, what kind of data does each group need to really help them move forward and keep learning moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, some of those kinds of like responses to the users and the data around the users, really just, kind of spotlights that customer development process. What are some of the tools you use, or what are some of the ways that you look to understand the customer better and to tune the platform? Like, I really like the example of like realizing like early learners, some of the kinds of gamification we think of in video games don't work as well. Like, what are some of the ways you drew that kind of insight out, and how did you incorporate that customer development knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with customers, and I'll be frank with you. Sometimes it was hard because you're like, I thought this was going to work, and then it just doesn't, right? And you're like, oh, it's such an uncomfortable feeling,
Yeah.
right? And you're putting like your heart on the line there, and then somebody's like, this is awkward, or this is inconvenient, or I'm confused. So you're really just iterating on that feedback. And so we got a lot of great feedback. We do have a lot of data. How do you present it? That's where, we worked with a professor at Drexel, and, she said, no, just keep it simple. I want to know that they started it. I want to know if they're 25% confident, 50, 75, or 100. And I would prefer that in like little circles, as opposed to the numbers on the page, because it's easier to glance and see who I need to talk to. And then, we then just started moving that information up.
Yeah. Interesting. And it sounds like simplifying it in a lot of ways, just making it easier to take action.
Yeah, you learn a lot about yourself when you start something new. And I would have never thought. I always led with like the more complicated way, but you feel like, okay, there's always the more complicated way, and then you're simplifying it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. What were some of the things you did to try to develop repeatable systems, like, whether it's automation or just internally? How did you start to just prepare yourself to support more customers in a more consistent way?
Yeah. So we're big on systems, and even our platform is a system, right? So we bring everybody in, and so we really look to what the customer's needs are at the time. And there is an evolution to even how they onboard. So at first we make it easy for them to create content that's unique to their organization. So we have AI tools built into our system that they can use to create a really good rough draft, right? And then they can go edit. So creating training material no longer takes weeks. It takes hours. It could even take just an hour, depending on what you're doing. So we start there to make sure there are no bottlenecks, and we're always looking to remove those bottlenecks.
Yeah. And in a sense, the customers become the content creators for the training, right? I mean, their platform's there, but they've still got to say, this is our process that we want all of our employees to learn. Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, and so because we give them very focused training, it's very unique to their organization, and we meet them where they are. So for a lot of customers, they start with the technical training, right? That's how they get in. They that's where they start feeling comfortable, where they know what somebody needs to learn, and then we really work with them hands on to help them understand our system and how people learn. And that's really a distinction that we work closely with customers on. So we're not a teaching platform, we're a learning platform.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things, by the time we're all adults, we have in common is we've all been in classes where the teacher is teaching, right? And no one's learning.
Yeah.
And so we really just help them take their material, break it down into learnable bits, right? That then get progressively more challenging. And we show them how to do that. Our AI automatically does that. Some companies outsource all of that to us, and then they just review. But that's really where we start, and then once they see the progress there and the success, they start expanding. So we're working with a managed service provider, just to give you, a hands-on example, a real life example. We're working with a managed service provider who um, uses an Indian call center, right? And what they really wanted to do was take back control of their training, because their escalation calls were just skyrocketing and they couldn't figure out why. And so what they didn't have was visibility into the training that was happening in India, because they're here based in New Jersey, right? And so they started rolling out the training. They personalized it. They recorded themselves sometimes, so that the team in the call center could feel connected to them,
Yeah.
right? And then as they saw the call escalations reducing, they identified other problems, and so now we're working with them on creating content around workplace English,
Hmm.
right? So we take AI, we mine, the challenges that the team is having, and then we create training materials specific for that challenge, to help them feel like they're being invested in. So
Yeah.
not criticism, it's more of like, and that's why we call it workplace English. Like, we want them to feel like they're learning something new. They're learning how to communicate with a technical US audience.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the connection to culture. It's almost it's the confidence in the content and the knowledge, but it's also just the connection between those that are really, learning and perfecting the individual skills with really the team that's supporting them and helping them to be successful.
Yeah, and so and for this company that I mentioned, the managed service provider, they were really great, because most people are camera shy, and what they did was their CTO recorded a mini lesson. So our micro topics are complete. You can have a mini lesson and then the practice questions,
Mm.
right? And so he recorded just on his phone, a simple recording on his phone, to introduce himself, introduce the technical information. And so the team really loved getting the training from the company's CTO, right?
Yeah.
And so they were more engaged than to jump into the practice questions and really learn. So there's that personalization to it as well, that really motivates employees to keep going.
Yeah. I love that. Love that. So let's zoom out a little bit. We talked a bit about how it started, trying to solve a problem, iterating, finding that product market fit. And then now we've, looked at, how you started to build on that, find a broader customer base, providing value in a kind of consistent and sustainable way. What's it like now, or what, either looking back or looking ahead for you and Kevin in terms of, being able to take a little bit of a step back from everyday operations and keeping the wheels turning, to looking more visionary to where's the direction going? How do we, get the business to run itself in a more self-sustaining way? What are some of the things you're thinking about in that space?
Let's see. So we're thinking about a couple things. So, I think it's really, getting the messaging down, right, in a way that the people we're targeting can understand it. So really helping them understand we can help them shape their team, make decisions faster, and really build their reputation, right? And so, when you talk about what does somebody want to benefit? Yeah, people want to train employees. They want them to be well versed in their products and services and their approach. But really, what they want to do is, when you're talking at the executive level, they really want to have a great, online reputation. They want customer-facing teams that are high performing, and so really getting that messaging down. And then really identifying, for us, it's, how do you find those type of customers? And that's where, it's still a lot of, cold calling. It's a lot of attending events. So we're getting a chance to talk to people, because what we have found, most people are not typing into Google, training platform, and so and looking for us. So that's not where they're going to find us. So just kind of meeting the customer where they are.
Yeah. And really
Is
doing that.
really, that's where we're focused at right now.
Yeah. Do you envision a point where you could, step away to a point that you're primarily working on the business rather than in the business, or even more removed than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we, as we get more stable, where we're not iterating as often, because in education there's a lot of iteration, as you work with the different age groups and you work with the different audiences, to understand what data is important to them. So you're creating, you're taking your data and turning it into useful information, right? We can start stepping back, letting teams do that. We've built a lot of the knowledge that we have about creating content into the AI, so you can get, a great first draft. But yeah, right now we're really hands-on with customers, but I pretty soon I can see us having more people on our team that are really helping manage client relations.
Yeah. You mentioned AI, obviously a very big topic in the education space right now. How is AI changing your approach and agenda, and what are some ways you've leveraged it as you've advanced the platform?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a way to really create the learning material faster, but create high quality learning material. So, right now, if you have companies that are creating it in-house themselves, it's, dependent on that one or two people, that one person or two people that are creating it. And so now you can create content that's high quality. You can create great scenarios you can get a good first draft in less than an hour. I mean, you could really get one in 15, 20 minutes. And so now you're putting those people in roles of where they can edit, not have to try to generate every question, every scenario from scratch. And then they can get more training material out there, so that you're not capped at, well, with 2,000 hours of work in a year, we can only create, 10 training modules or 20 training modules. Now, most of our customers have 30 to 40 modules. So they're doing, weekly training just to keep things top of mind for people. And that would be pretty difficult to do with one or two people.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's increasing capacity in a fairly significant way.
Yeah, you're getting that capacity, without adding an additional headcount,
Yeah.
or 1, 2, 3, however many you would need to get the output that they're getting now.
Yeah. So what does FactSumo look like if the vision were fully realized, today? What would it look like in terms of what unique value that you'd be bringing to customers that are using the platform?
The unique value is that you're really shaping the team and building the reputation, right? And so what it would look like is we're expanded across more sectors. Right now we're in, like technical industries, like a managed service provider. We're in, industries where there's multi locations and a lot of products, like banking, like working with regional banks, and restaurants and coffee shops, where again there's high turnover. The menu might be changing daily or weekly, and you're bringing in a young adult type of person, who may not know how to pronounce all the wines, or may not know how to recommend wine pairings that go with the menu items, right? So, but we would be in a broader sector space.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So I've heard you talk about some secrets you've discovered in terms of, just building learning that sticks. So
Yes.
you willing to share that a little bit?
Yeah. And so, you want to make it short. You want people to feel this accomplishment, but they need scenarios, right? So you have to couple the fact-based learning with scenario-based learning. And if it's mobile, that's even better, because that encourages people to, learn during their downtime. It allows you to keep them, at their location, say in a branch, right? So that's really the first little secret is around the content. The
Yeah.
second would be to use data to follow up, not just for delivery. So not just to know, okay, they've completed the training. It's to really know how confident they are, and then guide, managers, regional managers, whoever's, overseeing the process, letting them give them information so they can easily identify which employees they have to, coach and develop, right? And then really let employees make mistakes. And so that's what our app does really well. We, in a low stake environment on our app, they're getting the practice so that they can make the mistakes there and build their confidence. They're not making the mistakes in front of the customer.
Mm.
And so the aim is not that they don't make any mistakes, it's that they make, fewer mistakes in front of the customer. And that's why we always say it's like learning an instrument, or, playing a sport. You never, the first time you blew into a trumpet, right? Like, it wasn't the most beautiful sound, I imagine, but
True
just
story. It wasn't.
but, I imagine just, a few hours later, it started to get better, right? And motivated you to keep going on. And so that's why we give immediate corrective feedback in our app. So they know whether or not they got it right, and they get another chance, to get it right if they got it wrong. And then, and then really support your managers with visibility. It's really hard to know what to do if they don't have the information, if they don't have that level of insight. So what you want to do is have that visibility lead them to make better decisions, not just give them more work.
Yeah. So maybe just to summarize that. So 4 secrets for building learning that sticks, starting with scenario-based kind of modules,
Yeah.
um, data, really number 2, just using data to really support the learner. Number 3, allowing mistakes, giving people that opportunity to practice. And number 4, giving managers visibility so they can see what's happening and support, but not actually generate more work for them. Is that a
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. That's a nice recap.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, that's really, really excellent. Well, this has been really interesting. Thanks so much for sharing your insights and your story. If someone wanted to learn more about Fact Sumo or get more involved with what you're doing, or just to connect with you in some way, what are some ways someone might reach you or reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can find us on the website. So factsumo.com. So FACTSUMO.com. They can email us at info@factsumo.com. And then, they can even find us on LinkedIn if they're there, and they can message us through LinkedIn or, another social media platform. But those are the ways to find us.
Great. And I'll include those in the description below. Certainly anyone watching, if you have comments or questions, post them. I'll make sure that Kim has a chance to respond to those as well. And Kim, this is awesome. This has been such a great conversation. Before we wrap up, I always like to ask anyone who's on the channel, just do you have a favorite founder film? And if so, what is it and why?
I do. And so it's Air. It's
Great.
about the Nike story. And look, what I really love about it is that you're betting on people, right? You're trusting your gut, and you're pushing through to build something, right? And I feel like the film really captured like all the emotions. It did a great job of taking you back, right, to that time when Nike was trying to land Michael Jordan and launch the Air Jordans. So I feel like it's a great film. But I do have one more that I would like to mention, if I can.
Of course.
So I also loved Motel Makeover, which was on Netflix, and it's about the June Motel. And so 2 women started buying up motels and revamping them, completely changing what it looked like. And what I thought they did a great job in the story arc there is that the roller coaster is real. Yeah. Right. And you really get that. But you also get the joy from getting it right. So those would be my 2. So if you're not ready for a whole movie, you can pop into Netflix and, see episode by episode.
Oh, I love that. Well, and what's interesting about both of those is they really point to a space I would call entrepreneurship or corporate entrepreneurship, in the sense that both involve something that has worked in the past.
Yes.
But has maybe kind of moved to a place where it's not as relevant as it once was. And then that visionary, that person was able to then see, from here, we could transform in a way and create something new that's even maybe more powerful, more valuable than what was successful in the past.
Right.
And so, yeah, some really good examples. I have not seen Motel Makeover. That is going to be on my Netflix watch list for sure. And of course, Air, Shoe Dog, Ben Affleck making a little bit of a guest appearance there for that one. And Matt Damon's character, just having that vision to be able to see what was possible in what was already kind of assumed was like, this is a space we'll never be able to be relevant in, and being able to take that innovative look. And the last thing I would say, just what you said, just that ability, that betting on people, his ability to like just sit down with Michael Jordan's mom and say, I care about Michael and I care about this product more than anyone else you're ever going to meet. And, being able to like say, bet on us, even though we're not going to write the biggest check, that is such a powerful ability and great part of the story.
Yeah. I mean, look, and, what I also love is that you get to see how many doubters he had. Right. And, he had to try to convince them, and the way you think you're going to sell, is not the way you sell, right? Like, you had to sell to Michael Jordan's mom, not Michael Jordan, right? So, and that's true too for, I think, any startup, any new business, is who you think is going to buy, who you think you're selling to, and then who's actually buying. And you go through that learning. And I just thought they did a great job showing that.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, Kim, thanks so much for being here. Loved hearing your story. So great to hear about your journey.
Thanks. It was wonderful to be here. I appreciate it. I'll see you later.
All right, keep going.